The Bible records that Joshua led the Israelites out from Shittim. They camped on the east bank of the Jordan and waited. At the end of the 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, "When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place. Follow it, so that you may know the way you should go, for you have not passed this way before. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, a distance of about 2,000 cubits. Do not come any nearer to it." The ark represents the seat of God. The ark leads. It represents God's presence and guidance. 2,000 cubits is about 1,000 meters. The Israelites were to keep a distance of about 1,000 meters from the ark. This indicates that getting too close to the holy God is not allowed.
The Israel troops departed from Shittim and came to the shore of the Jordan.
Here it is, the upstream of the Jordan River. Downstream, near the Dead Sea, is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan River.
The Jordan River is about 250 kilometers long, originated from the Mount Hermon. Upstream, it flows from Mount Hermon along the border of Lebanon and Syria until it reaches the Tel Dan National Park. The elevation drops and the water flows rapidly. By the time it reaches the Lake of Galilee, it is already lower than the sea level. Downstream begins from the Lake of Galilee. It forms a border between Israel and Jordan. This section of the river is winding and turning. Besides, it is joined by two main tributaries from the east. They are the Yamluk River and the Zarka River, which is commonly identified as the Jabbok River in the Bible. It is the second largest tributary of the Jordan downstream. The Jabbok flows from east to west into the Jordan. In Genesis, Jacob wrestled with the angel at the ford of Jabbok. Later, the angel blessed Jacob and renamed him Israel. This is how the Israelites are named. The Jordan River finally flows into the Dead Sea of more than 400 meters below sea level. The place where downstream flows through forms a fertile Jordan Valley. It is also the section where the Israelites must cross to enter the land of Canaan. Today, we see the Jordan River is relatively narrow. It's because the farms on both sides extensively use the Jordan water for irrigation. But in ancient times, in the spring, during April and May, the Gregorian calendar states the time of harvest in the Bible. Melting snow on Mount Hermon causes the flood. It overflows to the two sides of the Jordan River banks. Fields and houses are all submerged.
All Israelites who experienced the Red Sea passage miracle, except for Joshua and Caleb, had died in the wilderness. Facing the raging waters of the Jordan, the new generation of Israel will experience the same trial of faith like their ancestors who passed through the Red Sea.
Following God's instructions, the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant, leading the people to provide guidance for crossing the river. When the feet of the priests who carried the ark entered the river, the miracle happened. The Bible says that the waters stood still at the city of Adam, in the upstream of the mouth of the Jabbok, and piled up in a heap. The waters that flowed to the Sea of Arabah, today's Dead Sea, were totally cut off. From Adam City to the Dead Sea, more than 30 kilometers long, the riverbed became a dry ground.
The priests who carried the ark stopped and stood in the middle of the riverbed. The nation of Israel, as spectacularly as did their parents' generation when they crossed the Red Sea, walked through the Jordan on the dry ground. After all the people had crossed the riverbed, God commanded Joshua to let the priests come up from where they stood. Once their feet touched the ground of the riverbank, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before.
Scholars pointed out that in 1927, an earthquake occurred at this part of the Jordan River. Some of the cliffs slipped into the river from Adam Bridge on. Consequently, the Jordan River was cut off for 21 hours. At the time when the Israelites crossed the river, a similar earthquake might have caused the river to be blocked. In fact, God can use any method to accomplish His will, no matter what.
Joshua chapter 4 records that after Joshua led the Israelites across the Jordan River, they camped at Gilgal. Archaeologists generally agree that this Gilgal Argabon, located not far from the northeast of Jericho, is the Gilgal where Joshua camped and offered sacrifice. There are several places in the Old Testament called Gilgal, because Gilgal means roll, and can be referred to as a place to camp and sacrifice. Chapter 5, verse 9 says that after they crossed the river, God wanted Joshua to name the first place of encampment Gilgal. Probably this is the meaning. Looking to Gilgal from this height, we see clearly the traces of the tabernacle at the top of the site and the altar.
The tabernacle and the altar were surrounded by a short stone wall, like the shape of a man's right foot. The right side is the heel, and the left is the toe. The altar is in the front part of the foot, and the holy place and the most holy place are in the middle of the foot. Archaeologists imitated the Israelites, following God's command in Joshua chapter 4, verse 20, and placed 12 stones from the Jordan around the site of the tabernacle as a remembrance. With these stones, God wanted to remind the descendants of the Israelites to always fear the mighty God who had saved them. In Jerusalem, the Israel Museum exhibits a knife made of a wooden handle and 4 flint blades. In the ruins of Ai, archaeologists also excavated some flint blades about the same as Joshua's time, and they matched the Bible records of the tools used by the Israelites of the time. In the beginning of Joshua chapter 5, Joshua carried out God's instruction and used these flint knives to circumcise the new generation of Israelites who had crossed the Jordan. God said, "Today I have rolled away from you the disgrace of Egypt." God wanted to remind the Israelites that they must bear the mark of the covenant with God.
After the circumcision, chapter 5, verse 10 says that they kept the Passover in the evening on the 14th day of the month in the plains of Jericho. 40 years after the Israelites left Egypt, they observed the Passover again for the first time. The next day, they ate the produce of the land, that is, unleavened cakes and parched grain. The Bible says that manna also ceased. It shows that God let them end their wanderings and take root in the land of Canaan. God wanted the Israelites to be circumcised and to celebrate the Passover before the campaign, for He wanted them to put the things of God as priority. Sure enough, no enemy came to disturb them during the period of recuperation from circumcision. And on the days of observing the Passover, it testifies that God is protecting the Israelites. This teaches us, even when facing major challenges, we have to place God as our first priority. The Bible immediately records Joshua's experience near Jericho. Joshua was alone in the plains of Jericho. He looked towards Jericho. I believe he was praying for God's revelation on how to lay siege of this strong city. At that moment, he met a man holding a sword. Joshua asked the man if he would come to help them. Verse 14 records the reply from this man. As commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come.
Then Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped. The action expressed his full surrender of sovereignty in submission before God.
God reminded Joshua that he is the true commander of the army of Israel, not a helper. The battles ahead were the battles of God. Followed by chapter 6, God instructed Joshua the way to attack the city of Jericho.
At Spring of Water International Ministries, we invite you to journey with us, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Isaiah 55:10. To find out more, follow Spring of Water International Ministries.